So as soon as we have our first viewer, I'll start.
Sounds good.
And also we have this like comment streaming in. So we'll just, if there are like interesting questions, so we'll just take them in.
Okay, that sounds great.
Oh, here's our first viewer. So I'll just start.
Welcome, welcome.
So welcome everybody to the Tech Life session powered by Odetta. I'm live from Karachi, Pakistan, and it has been 4 months since we've been observing physical distancing, and it's the most important time of the year. Most of the graduates are looking for jobs. They're mid-level professionals who are losing whatever they had. Everybody's trying to struggle with whatever is going on. They're trying to prove themselves to be the best out there, and since the competition is getting harder, we like identify this problem that people are not able to put their point across and not able to present them the way they should. Um, can you hear me? Can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
Is it fine? Yeah, good. Okay. So now today the topic is it's not so much of a mystery, but we have an amazing industry specialist, Anum Hussain, who has joined us all the way from US. She is a talent marketing speaker, an entrepreneur, a blogger, and an awesome content strategist. So let's hear what she has to say today. Hi, Anum.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Oh, it's going great over here.
Awesome. No, thank
you so much for having me join. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you for making the time. As a founder, I'm pretty sure it's pretty busy out there.
I think it's busy for everyone, but yeah, I mean, right now we are closing a fundraising round, so that's definitely a little busy, but I mean, I'm always happy to make time for events like this, so.
Congratulations on winning that round, though.
Thank you, thank you.
How's the COVID situation over there? How are you handling the distributed team? I mean, pretty sure you must have gone to office and now everybody's just all over the place. So how are you handling that as a founder?
Yeah. No, it's a great question actually for us in particular because we're a small early stage startup. So that means that we don't have all the funding in the world. Being a woman of color founder in the United States is not easy in terms of getting funding either. And so we're always thinking of crafty ways to save money. And one of those ways is that we built our own office. So the office is actually in my apartment. So I gave up having a living room, family room, really just any semblance of privacy. And I live in the bedroom in the back, and then the rest of my apartment is all an office. But because of COVID, no one is coming. So to save money again, we're now selling every bit of the office that we built a year ago. And I'm working on moving into a separate apartment now. So it is a little busy, but we've decided to be a fully forever remote team. We're finding it to be really effective and cost saving. And so, yeah, COVID kind of switched things up for us, but I guess it all worked out in the end.
So now that you're going remote, are you considering hiring from like different regions since it doesn't involve coming to office anymore?
Yeah, actually, we already have our full-time engineers from Pakistan. Our head of usability is in New York. One of our machine learning and all over the place.
That's good. I think having diversity, having a diverse workforce is always adding more flavor and more interesting conversations going on in the work environment.
Yeah,
it's always yeah. So let's just like try to get to know you better. Like you're the very accomplished individual. You're doing content. You're really good at having great strategies for content. So we want to know how you became the individual you are today. So let's start from the beginning.
Right.
What kind of were you? Like, what were you facing when you were just 15 years old in your teenage years? What were your dreams? What were you thinking? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, when I was about 13, 14, actually, I watched this movie. It was called 13 Going on 30. And it had Jennifer Garner, and it was all about this like little girl who suddenly was 30 years old and was I don't know her exact title, but she was running some department at a magazine, and she was like trying to bring different perspectives and faces to the magazine versus the normal models you always saw. And I don't know what it was about that movie, but I loved it. I was so inspired, and I was like, I'm going to work in a magazine. And that was like what I wanted to do. I like made my own magazine out of construction paper and yarn, and I interviewed my dad, which was really just like I watched him watch like Geo News, and then I would just like regurgitate what was already being reported, ask him some questions so that I would get some interviews in it, and put together this little magazine. And that's sort of who I was. I wasn't very good as a student in terms of paying attention in class. I was never someone who is like, you know, if you went back and saw my middle school, high school transcripts, they are not, you know, great by any means. I just was never someone who was great at learning in that kind of environment. I loved doing. I loved creating things. In any of the classes that I did get an A in, it was always like the art classes, the creative classes that required you to physically build something or write something. That was sort of where I thrived. But in terms of test taking and paying attention, that was not my thing. So that's really where it all started. And even in high school, I did an independent study where I created our high school's first magazine. And I went from construction paper to now learning how to do things on in design and interviewing students and putting things together. That carried over into college when I decided to study journalism, and hosted a news show in New Hampshire that was all about spotlighting the Muslim community in New Hampshire, which people didn't even know there were Muslims in New Hampshire, which, by the way, New Hampshire is a very, very, very small state in the United States, so no one ever expects there to be any diversity there. So that was just like a thread that kept going, but as I grew older, things started to change, which goes down another discussion topic, but that's sort of who I was as a student and where my energy came from.
So when you were like having such diverse communication with different people, what was that one thing that you learned through that in your teenage years that made you stick through it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like I loved being different. Like everyone around me was like, oh, you know, you have to be studying for stats, or you have to be doing pursuing like a biology major. You have to be on the path to becoming a doctor. And I never like fit in with those conversations. And I liked being different. I loved the reactions I got, right? When like all my friends are studying for like their math exam, and then they see my magazine. They're like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, how did you do that? It was much more unknown. People didn't know how to do the things that I was doing. And I loved that. I loved being different. I loved being able to show that I could do something unique.
So coming from like a Brown family, did you think that you had that pressure on pursuing the typical engineering or the medical degrees, and you having the dream of pursuing journalism? How did that work out?
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, it wasn't 100% the typical pressures, and it wasn't like constant. Definitely in high school, my dad was very much like, I forget the name of the program, but there was like a program to on the path to becoming a doctor that my high school provided. So he had me take that. He had me super involved. He really wanted, like, I'm one of four. He wanted one of us to be a doctor. None of us are. But to be fair, he was a businessman. So a lot of us just followed his path in going into business. And so, yeah, there was definitely some pressure. But as soon as I started studying journalism, and as soon as I started in college, and my dad started to see the work I was doing, he immediately got on board and was like, all right, like, okay, if you're going to do this, then you have to be the best at it, because if you're not going to be the best at it, you're not going to make any money at it. And he watched a lot of news. And so he would tell me, you have to be like Anderson Cooper, or you have to be like Larry King. Like, he was constantly giving me names and showing me, like, this is what you need to do. So my dad is very supportive, but he does give pressure in that he wants you to go down a certain path, right? And that happened again once I got to business school. He knew I was a marketer, a journalist, all that sort of stuff. I got to business school, and he was like, all right, so now you're going to go into investment banking. And I was like, no, Daddy, no, I'm not. So he's always trying. He's not forcing it, but he's always trying. He'll have the conversation. But he's definitely doesn't give the pressure that I've heard other people have. So I'm fortunate for that.
That's pretty interesting that you being passionate about journalism, and then you're having that talk, and then you'll be like, oh no, I'm not going down that road again.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you just mentioned that I'm pretty amazed that you mentioned that you didn't have such good transcripts, but you still made it to MIT. How did that work out?
Yeah, so I mean, I was never the kind of student that anyone expected to go to MIT. I remember when I got in, someone literally messaged me and said that people from our community were like, wait, that Anum, like our Anum, she got into MIT, and people were kind of confused by it. And I didn't get in because, I was like the rock star student or I had the best GMAT scores or anything like that. I got in because of everything I said before, which was I had a unique story. I was trying things and doing things that other students weren't. And so when they looked at my application, I brought different things to the table than everyone else did. And so I didn't get in based on scores or school performance. I got in based off of the recommendations that my managers gave for my performance. I got in based off the stories I told of like the career decisions I've made and just how unique my path into business was from everyone else around me.
So, like, I was really curious about why did you choose MIT? You were into journalism, and then you just went there into like doing an MBA. What made you go for that?
Yeah, so I after being a journalist, I ended up leaving journalism because for a number of reasons, and I ended up at a company called HubSpot in Boston, and I ended up there by accident. Like I joined as a blogging intern, thinking like, oh, cool, they have like a blog I can write for. I was a journalist, right? That sounded appealing. And then when I was there, they started mentioning all these words like lifetime value and cost of customer acquisition, and I was like, what's going on here? And I learned that it was a software company. So I was totally and ended up in tech by accident. And I ended up actually loving it. And the thing that HubSpot made really awesome is that they weren't trying to teach business in like a boring way. They were like, my managers were all very understanding. They were happy to bring things to simple terms. And they were really about making like the marketing side and the business side of the company just as like fun as the creative side. And so I was able to learn about business for the first time by people who are willing to actually explain it in simple terms without making me feel like I was dumb, right? Like I think you're in any sort of business course, there's always like everyone is trying to like one up everyone in the room, and everyone's coming with this like I'm a business person attitude, and that was never me. But when I got to HubSpot, it was all these people who were super humble, super willing to teach, and who were like, yeah, okay, you don't get how to build like this formula in Excel, like who cares? Like here's exactly how you do it. Like let's walk through it together. And didn't make me feel lesser than for not knowing those things. And as a result, I ended up loving business and realizing I could actually have a career in business, and ended up going to business school to learn everything else that seemed so daunting when I was a younger student.
So, is there like, since you've learned the lesson over there, what would you say to other maybe founders or people who establish the company culture? What would you give them? Like, what advice would you give them so that they can make this better for other people?
Yeah, I think actually I'll steal a trick that one of my former managers, Brian Balfour, used. And every time he assigned me something new, he would say like, do you want to learn how to do this on your own, or do you want me to walk you through how I would do it? And the idea there was that oftentimes we like expect employees to just figure something out, but that could take them like hours of the day that could be spent executing versus learning. And so he kind of made it my responsibility to decide like, okay, do I feel like I'll be able to quickly learn this on my own, or do I feel like I actually need someone to like hold my hand throughout it? And so I think that was one really great thing that he did that was really helpful for me, because I could be like, I know I'm going to waste a whole day trying to figure this out. Can you just show me in 30 minutes how you would do it? Right. And so I think that was one really great strategy. The other thing is just understanding that you hired someone onto your team, or you're bringing someone onto your startup team because of the unique value they bring, not because they know everything you know. And so it's your job to help educate everyone on the things that you know, and hope that in turn they educate you on what they know, because really on the early stages, it's all like an equitable team that's all contributing to a greater goal.
So, like, do you? So if there's a lot of Q&A going on, so if the newbies are asking a lot from the people who are like experts, don't you think that it's like kind of, even though there is like a knowledge transfer session going on, but wouldn't that slow down the process?
Maybe it feels like it's slowing it down in the short term, but it's actually helping you save time in the long term, right? Because you might say like, all right, just go for it. Like just get to the ground working, and no one asks questions because they're afraid to, or they think it's going to waste time. But then you end up wasting time. Like, what if you do the project wrong and now you have to go back to square one? I mean, we have someone on our team who is incredible at asking questions, and he knows it. Like he asks so many questions, but it's because he doesn't want to waste time going down this rabbit hole of the wrong thing and then coming back and having to start from square one. So we spend a lot more time setting up a project, but then we get through the project really effectively as a result.
So now you got your exposure to business, and then you were very passionate about journalism. How did you think of starting up your own company? Where did this inspiration come from?
Yeah, so I definitely did not go to business school knowing I would be an entrepreneur. I think that's why people assume that I went knowing that. But it kind of just happened. I was there my first semester, and in my communications class, we had to do a number of different research projects. And of course, I researched what I know, which is tech and media. And I always wanted to get back into media, but through the lens of business or tech. And I learned through doing my research how many problems still exist for readers. I mean, I experienced them myself as a news reader, and it's because there's a lot of problems that need to be solved with tech versus content, and there's so much tension between those two, people who are creators versus people who are technologists. And so being someone who sat in both camps, I felt like I could bring unique value in marrying those two together versus someone who maybe sits in just one camp and is trying to understand the other.
How was your experience in explaining something techie to the people who are not so familiar with that, and the other way around? I mean, I would really love to know that part.
Yeah, I'm still figuring out how to do it best. I think my problem is that I end up going too much into the details and not enough and the big picture. And that's really important too, is being all right, here's why we're doing this. This is the purpose of why this exists. And I think that's been really important. And then also lots of visuals. So for example, we're a Chrome extension, which means that in order to test the extension, we needed people to manually upload the beta version of it multiple times. And so just really quickly making a video that's hey, you go here, you do this, and knowing that everyone just needs those instructions. And once they get them, they're oh yeah, that was so easy. And now we have our content marketers testing the. It just requires those visuals and a little bit of patience.
So you were from an MBA background, right? You did not have a technical degree. How did you come up with this idea that this needed to be a Chrome extension, for example? How did you figure out the tech part? The idea is so great. Usually, what a usually marketing person would do would be they'd come up with a website or something that that would be served on a website, not something that would be easily integrable into any other laptop out there. So how are working out?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, I have an amazing technical co-founder who is building the product, but you have to get that co-founder as well. And I did see people make this mistake in my MBA program, which is that we had business people. I was on MIT's campus. You're approaching some of the best engineers in the country, and you're telling them hey, I want to start a business. The first step is I need someone to help me with the website. An engineer is going to look at you and be I want to build a website. I didn't come to MIT to build a website, right? I came to MIT to solve big problems. And so I've never, that's never been me. I've built every website I've come across myself. I mean, you really just need to know basic coding, right? There's a lot of Webflow, Squarespace, HubSpot, whatever you use, you just need a little bit of coding knowledge that you can look up, and that I've taught myself through Khan Academy and General Assembly courses. There's lots of different things, services out there. I mean, I could definitely never build a product, but I can definitely do what I need to build a website. And so one, never ask great technical talent to do the easy stuff that you can just learn and do yourself. But then two, in terms of finding that technical talent, I wanted to make sure that I had a vision for the company and the product. And so there's also a lot of tools that allow you to build mock-ups. I mean, I'm a little old school in that I use PowerPoint a lot to design still, which maybe makes a lot of people shocked, but there's so many tools. There's Balsamic that allows you to make mock-ups. There's, Canva, there's Sketch. I use PowerPoint. I really wanted to make sure I had a vision. And so I just designed what I thought the product could look like, so that when I did talk to potential technical co-founders, I could show them hey, here's exactly what I'm thinking. Here's what the design could be, the UI could be. And they're coming in being oh, I actually see what you're saying. And even if that's not the exact version of the product that ends up being, at least they know I'm serious. Like, I'm not just like some creative bobblehead who's like, I want to build something. Can you like figure it out? Right? I'm coming being like, hey, like I've done my testing. I've talked to users. This is like sort of the UI and functionality I think that could exist. And then I also, in my specific use case, when I was at HubSpot, was on a team that launched a browser extension. So I already knew a little bit about that world and the product marketing of a browser extension as well.
So it's all about your individual experiences that do seem so not connected when you're going through them, but eventually they all just combine together and then they make you who you are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, when I was studying journalism, I had no idea that I would ever be the founder of a tech company, nor would I ever think that like someone like me would be capable of doing so. And maybe I'm still not, who knows? But you know, you just kind of I think that's something I always tell people is that just because you majored in one thing in undergrad doesn't mean that you won't end up doing something completely different, right? Like when I was at HubSpot, we had former stand-up comedians who are now in sales. I mean, my fiance is an entertainer who also is an account manager at a tech company. Like everyone is in different boats. And so know that your experiences mean something and they can lead you in so many different ways.
I think it's like always thinking out of the box and then always exploring the new horizons. And the success is never gonna come in your comfort zone, I believe.
Exactly.
So now that you're a founder and you're a CEO of your own company, so at first I'm pretty sure you would have gone through a lot of interview processes and you would have observed the behavior of employees all around. So you climb up your way. And now that you founded your own company, what were some things that you look in your potential employee that everybody needs to know?
Yeah, I mean, we've been really fortunate. I mean, when you're at a startup size as us, we're a pre-seed startup, we're like 2 co-founders, a full-time engineer, and then some part-time folks. We're really small. Like this is a really, really small team that's really, really early. We're looking for people who are passionate about what we're doing beyond anything. Obviously, that changes a little bit when you go to a growth stage startup. At a growth stage startup, they're looking for people who are just like willing to do anything and everything. So I'll give examples for both. So again, for mine, which is a very early stage startup, it's about, are they super passionate about what we're building? Because if you're not, like, you're just not going to have the energy to do all the random tasks that come with an early stage startup, and being really willing to roll with the punches and know helping us. The other day she's fundraising, the other day she's like talking to partners. Like I don't have consistent time with everyone. So like everyone needs to be like very independent, know what their charter is, and be able to just focus on that. I think the hardest parts in our company's history has been when I've, had to bring someone on that requires a lot of day-to-day help, because that's just not where we as founders at this early stage can provide value. We just have too much to do at a small startup. So it's really being passionate and being able to independently work. At a growth stage startup, which is when I started at HubSpot myself, for companies like that, it's really about a willingness to do anything. Like if you ever find yourself in a position where you're going to say, well, that's not under my job description, don't go to a growth stage startup. Like go to a larger company where you're going to have like, this is my job, these are my duties, and this is what I'm going to focus on. But being at a growth stage startup is being like, okay, I'm a marketer, you're having a problem in support that could be solved with me, with my writing skills. So let me like jump in and help you, and vice versa. So it's really about like taking on anything that will help the company grow, versus thinking about just what your specific tasks are.
So when you went to HubSpot, did you consider what value would HubSpot provide to you, or were you just really into anything and everything at that point of time as well?
No, I was definitely very specifically interested in HubSpot. So I was studying journalism and decided to take a PR internship because I was now trying to get out of journalism. And while I was at this PR firm, they were basically doing everything that HubSpot teaches you not to do. And so I kept stumbling upon their articles and being like, whoa, like this is so smart. This is so interesting. And really just wanted to intern there to work for their blog because I loved the blog and I learned so much from it and felt like I could contribute to it. And so I very specifically was trying to get into HubSpot at that time.
Now you're a founder and a woman of color, and you are leading a tech company. How is that working out? What are the challenges that you have faced with all the blockages that usually do come with some prejudice, with some you get the gist. How are you overcoming that? Where does that confidence come from? How do you make the pitch when you think that this might not work?
Yeah, I mean, listen, being a woman anywhere is very tough. I know, I'm sure all of you know that, and it's no different here. It is different, but it's no different in that there's still challenges, is what I mean. So apologies for that. But basically, like, as a woman of color founder of a tech company, like, fundraising has been the most difficult thing. Getting people to just opt in and believe that we are the founders that can do this. And it's strange because you hear like so much in American VC that it's all about team, team, team. And then we'll present as like two women of color, MIT grads. I was formerly at one of the best startups in the country. My co-founder started her own company before I was at the MIT Media Lab, where she was like working on future of news projects with major companies. Like, we have all the like quote unquote, stamps that someone would need. But still, like, what we end up hearing is like, we want more traction. And so you see often that male founders are backed based on their ideas and that they're a great team, but female founders are backed based off of proven track records and traction, and like a much later stage than the idea. You actually have to have something built, have customers, have users, what might be. And so it requires you to work a lot harder for a lot less. And so that's definitely been tough. I mean, I've had to not give myself a salary multiple times, which means that I have to make my bills by doing freelance work on the side. So I'm fortunate to have been at HubSpot before, where I was a marketer, and so I can take on marketing contracts on the side to pay my bills, because the startup isn't in a place where I can do that yet. And so we face rejection a lot, and we face opposition a lot, which on a lot of days just makes you want to be like, all right, I don't know how long I can do this. And it's really, I mean, I won't lie, it's very, it's difficult. It beats down on you over and over again. But at the same time, one of my favorite quotes that I heard also in high school was that success is the best revenge. And that is really what fuels me once I get myself out of that rut, is like, you know what, like, the only way that I can make myself feel better about this rejection is by proving them wrong, and by continuing to push harder and harder, and not take their rejection as they know more than me, because no one knows more about you or your business than you do, but take it as they actually haven't understood what I can do yet. And so it's definitely a difficult journey. And it's not just me, all my fellow women of color founder friends are all battling the same issues over and over and over again. And so it's definitely a difficult landscape, but you just have to have the conviction that what you're doing is as important as it is.
When you were struggling to prove your point, like you were working extremely hard, what particular skills did you think that you did not have before and you acquired during that process that made you just be as convincing as your other peers?
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on it. I've definitely gotten a range of feedback. I've been told that I'm too confident. I've been told that I need to provide more data to be more confident. So as a woman, you're constantly being tossed around. You're like, all right, how confident am I supposed to be versus how, like, it's just like, there's a lot of different feedback points that you get. So I'm still working on it. I'm currently actually testing different ways that we approach our pitch. We used to approach our pitch when we talked to people and got on call with investors, being like explaining our backgrounds, and me sharing like my story from journalism to marketing to MBA, and hoping that all those credibility stamps will do something, and my co-founder would do the same thing. We've since started changing that and now talking about, here's the vision of the company, more than talking about us. Because everyone says, oh, we care about team, but then we're like, that's what we've been pitching and it's not working. So now we are switching our approach and not pitching ourselves as much, but pitching what the vision of the company can be first before we get into ourselves. And I'll see what the outcome is, but so far the conversations seem to be going better. So I'll keep you all posted.
I think you've won yourself a round, so I think that's a good win. I think that's paid off.
Thank you.
Especially in such a difficult time when you're just not getting your salaries or jobs, and you're just making your company go through a good boom. So I think that's a good win.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So now we're talking about your journey as a founder. We were talking about so let's talk about the product and how does that help anybody who's like who's using your Chrome extension? How is that beneficial for them?
Yeah. So Accio is a Chrome extension that, as you're reading a news article, pops up to the right of your screen and provides a timeline of previously published articles on the subject you're currently reading. So the idea is that sometimes opening up an article today feels like you're opening up a book in the middle and you're like, I don't know any of the characters mentioned, you just threw me into the story. But if you go to Google, you're just seeing the same headline over and over again. And if you try to learn beyond that, you end up down this rabbit hole of tab hell. And so instead of having to do all that, we just want to automatically surface all that context for you. So you can go back in time 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years and see how that narrative has unfolded. And so that's what we do. So no matter what news site you're on, we'll just pop up and give you that context right there and then. So the value is really being educated on the world around you. We're focusing primarily on US news sites right now, but we are looking to expand to English news sites outside of the US as well. So we'll slowly work on getting there. And if you try to use Accio on a news site that we are not on right now, we'll give you a little prompt to request it. So if you guys all request some sites, maybe we'll get to them faster sooner rather than later.
That's exciting news. So when you were developing the product, did you ever try to search yourself?
Search myself. No, actually, I haven't. That'd be interesting to try. But it is really about like major or breaking news topics or political news topics most often. But we could definitely try going to a news article I'm in and seeing what happens.
So I think that would be like a good way to convince people that you have this entire timeline for your own company or for yourself or for your co-founder, and then I think that would break out, because when I was doing the research, this is something that I was really intrigued about. I was like, hey, has she done this for herself? But how would that?
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I'll have to take that suggestion and go play with it.
Thank you. So now that you're coming to the actual topic, how to pitch yourself. I would just share a very small personal experience that for the first time that Catherine asked me to take a tech live session, I was at my wits end. I did not know how to do it. I literally every single thing down that I would say so that I'm proper, so I'm like I don't misspell something. And then slowly over a period of some like over some iterations, so that I just gained some confidence. But for some people who just do not get this opportunity to do so, I was really interested in getting to know how we can, as we are, improve ourselves, or some key points that you can just help us develop or work on.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you're doing a great job. So kudos to you and getting that confidence. But yeah, I mean, I think for everyone it's a little different. Now, for me, there's a couple different things I do. So now, if it comes, usually with pitches, like you're allotted a certain amount of time, right? And everyone says, "Oh, don't write your pitch out. Like, don't memorize the script. You're gonna sound inauthentic." Like, I say that's all BS. I always write out my script. I always plan out everything I'm going to say. And then I practice it over and over and over again. They say, I think, like, for however long your pitch is, you need to practice it that many times. So like if it's a 10-minute pitch, you need to practice it at least 10 times. If it's a 40-minute pitch, you need to practice it at least 40 times. And that's definitely what I do. Like for me, I'm not someone who can just like get up and start talking unrehearsed. Like I obviously want to sound as authentic as possible. But if you are doing like a time-based pitch, like my advice is to always like write out everything, because the benefit of that too is when you write things out, you can be like, actually, that sounds kind of weird. Like, I don't know if I want to say it like that. And so I always try to write it out. And then I get up and practice it over and over and over again. Some people do like recording themselves and giving themselves feedback. I do not recommend this because I think if it works for you, like do it. Like I definitely know people who it works for. For me personally, I hate the sound of my voice. And so that obviously I'm sure a lot of people do. And so you could be doing the best job and then watching yourself and being like, oh my God, I can't stand listening to me. And so what I prefer to do instead is loop someone in, whether it's my co-founder, my fiance, whoever, and be like, can I practice in front of you? And then they'll give me feedback that's actually helpful, right? Because if I'm just watching myself, I'm being way too critical. And so for me, it's about writing a script, practicing it a bunch of times, and getting feedback from others. And the place to get feedback is when you still have that script. So oftentimes when I practice in front of someone, I'm actually just reading the script, but like that's because I don't want to have to change so much of the script after I have it memorized. That's like a waste of your time, right? So write everything out, practice reading it a few times, then practice reading it to people who will hear you, get their feedback, make your adjustments, and then practice it as many times as you need to until you have it memorized and can just say it as if you're smoothly talking. And again, everyone has always told me, like, don't script it. But every pitch competition I've done, I've always gotten the feedback that I was one of the best speakers, whether or not I won the competition or I came in first place. Like, being like the best eloquently spoken person was always something that I was told. And I do think that's because I do script it, I memorize it, and I make sure I don't lose a beat when I have that allotted time.
So, and one thing that I'm really curious about, you're very flawless when you're communicating your content, whatever you want to say. You have your ticker on, and you don't even look at the slide. You just have it perfectly memorized. What's the maximum number of retries or the practice sessions that you've done for your own self?
That's a good question. So for some presentations, like the longer ones, the 45-minute ones with presentation decks, usually they have like a screen at the front of the stage. So that definitely helps for you to know exactly where you are. But I will say, like, for every presentation I do, I practice like at least 10 times. And when I show up, like, to the actual event, there are people who I am super impressed by, who can like walk around networking, chit-chatting. Like, I am in full introvert mode when I like arrive at an event I'm speaking to. Like, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just focused on like reciting my message over and over again, reviewing my slides, looking at my notes. Like, I can't talk to anyone until after. I hate networking in general too, so that's a whole different story. But yeah, like, I am very, very focused. Like, I practice it at least 10 times. I'm practicing it in the Uber ride over. I'm practicing it while I'm waiting for my turn. I'm reviewing it. And up until I'm done giving the actual speech, I'm not doing anything but focusing on that speech. And some people will say, like, don't be so stressed out, just like relax. Like, I don't want to relax. Like, I want to be in that mental mindset, right? I'll relax once I'm done. And so I think, again, like, for me, the standard tips around how to pitch yourself don't always resonate. Like, sometimes you do need to script it. Sometimes you do need to let that tension overwhelm you. I'm super stressed right before I give a talk. And I don't know if this is TMI, but for me, when I'm super stressed, I use the restroom a lot. So sometimes I'm like running back and forth between the restroom like 5 times, like, not kidding, before I get up on stage within the matter of like 3 minutes. I just like keep thinking I have to go again, or like I'll have to go when I present, and it just like aches away at me. And so, yeah, like, we all get stressed out. Like, no matter how good of a speaker you are, you still have that stress. And I think it's good. Like, it's positive stress that's helping channel you to do better versus just being like, I'm cool, I'm chill, like, I'm not worried, and then getting up there and not doing your best.
I promise, all the sessions that I've seen of yours, I could not see that coming. I thought that you were so flawless and you were just so confident. I wanted to ask, like, what really generated that confidence in you? Because I just stand there and I have this major stage fright. So, like, me being a Muslim, I used to do Quranic recitations, and I knew so much, and then I just forget about it. I just stand there, and you just cannot forget like a Quranic verse. Like, that's the greatest thing for a Muslim, right? And I would just do that in front of an entire stage. So, so I just wanted to get some really good tips from you, like, how do you manage that on stage? I mean, you did not forget even once, not even once. I tried to find, like, I was trying to do an analysis that she's a good content strategist and she's a good speaker. She claims to be, and she needs to be. She's a good storyteller as well. So let's like hear from her. How do you do that? I know that. So, for example, you've done multiple number of revisions, but when you're on stage, it's a completely different scenario. You cannot, no matter how many times people say that you imagine potatoes standing in front of you. No, they're not potatoes. They have eyes, and they have like big eyes, and they're looking at you, right? How do
Yeah.
you? Right?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of stuff there. Well, first of all, I think we've all had that. I mean, when I did Quran competitions when I was younger, I always forgot, and like the principal would have to whisper all the verses in my ear. He was my best friend's dad, so that helped. And so I always had that stage fright too. I think a couple things. One is I started dancing, just like at like dolkis and mendis and like small events with my family. And I think people would love it. And I think like getting that positive response from an audience like definitely builds confidence. And so I started doing it more and more and more. And you just got so comfortable on stage because when you finish, everyone's applauding and cheering and you're like, whoa, this is awesome, right? And so it definitely started with dancing and confidence, like being on a stage then. But then when I came for confidence with speaking, I mean, one, I did go to journalism school. So like I was learning, I was constantly doing broadcasting and interviewing. So that definitely helped. But I also did something, I don't know if this is global or not, but called Toastmasters. And basically, yeah. And so Toastmasters, I joined the Toastmasters club at HubSpot, and that was hugely beneficial because whenever you did a speech, they had different people timing. One person was timing you. One person was noting down all your crutch words. So how many times did you say or like? I used to say like all the time. I think one of the ways that I stopped saying the word like is that I said it a million times in a sentence once, and my older brother like called me out and was like, and made fun of me. And I think like when you're made fun of, you like instantly are like, I never want to do that thing again because I don't want to be made fun of again. So that definitely helped me as well. So yeah, I think Toastmasters was a big part of it because they were counting all of my crutch words and helping me. I think there's now an app version. I forget the name of it. It was actually started by a Pakistani founder here as well. I'll find it, but he started basically an app version of Toastmasters. So anyone can download it. It'll count your crutch words. It'll evaluate your speaking. And so that really helped. Dancing for me really helped, just constant reps. And then with speaking, like starting with smaller things, like my first few speaking gigs were like, maybe 10 people, then like 15 people, then like lower effort stuff that wasn't like as high stakes. And eventually you start to get better and better and better. And you get more confident with every audience. The last thing I'll put there is that you also mentioned like, these silly tricks that people have, like imagine everyone as potatoes or in their underwear, which like, why would imagining people in their underwear help me or benefit me in any way, shape, or form? But for me, I just do not look at anyone in the eye. Like I always look above their heads, because if you look out into an audience and all you're seeing is everything above their heads, you just know they're people, but you can't see their reaction. You can't see how they're feeling. Because if you look at the wrong person who maybe is just poker faced or like just looks more serious, it's just going to throw you off completely. Like do not try to look for affirmation in the audience. I think we try to do that. Like, okay, I've started. Let me see how people are responding to what I'm saying. Like, no, like I never look for how people are responding to what I'm saying. I know what I need to say. I get up there, I deliver it, and I wait for the feedback all at once afterwards. I don't want anyone to, get me cautious in the middle of my chat.
So, for example, now that you've gained confidence in like a huge audience in public, right? Now, let's talk about interviews, because most of our audience, they're like fresh level or mid-level professionals, and they're going through their interview processes, or maybe they're making some presentations. They're usually one-on-one. Like, for example, I'm one-on-one with you. I need to look into your eyes. And for example, if you're just not showing interest, how do we go through that situation?
Yeah, so obviously interviewing and one-on-one sessions are different. I would say I learned this a lot when I had that radio show and was interviewing people. It's really about coming prepared, but being willing to like roll with the punches. I think oftentimes we're like, okay, I prepared all my questions. I have to just like get through them. And if I don't get through them, I've like not succeeded. Like you have to set. And then whether it's one-on-one like this, or the other thing is when we're being interviewed, whether it's for a job or whether it's for like a press article, whatever it might be, before I go into something, I always think about, all right, if I had to walk out of this interview with 2 things that the audience took away from me, what would those 2 things be? And I write them down. And that way, when like you're being asked a question that you don't know the answer to, oftentimes one of the things you wrote down could be the answer, depending on how you present it, right? And so I always write those things down so that I know, like, okay, if I don't know how to answer a question, but I'm able to like address this point, I'll use that opportunity to answer that. And that works particularly well when you're interviewing for a job or when you're interviewing for a press article, because with press interviews, they're always going to try to ask you something and that catches you off guard. But if you already have like, okay, these are the statements I'm going to get across, just about any question you ask, you can answer with those statements. And similarly, in an interview, it just allows you to be on your feet and know like exactly what you want to get communicated by the end, and not be like, ooh, what was I supposed to say? And then the final thing being like, it's okay if you don't have an answer to a question. Like, I think we assume we always have to have the answer. And like I just had a pitch this morning for Accio, and an investor asked me a question I did not have the answer to. So I was like, here's how I think about it, but I don't have the answer yet, but I'm happy to, circle back and get it to you.
One of the most important questions that I wanted to ask you was, what is the best answer to tell me something about yourself?
It's obviously never an easy one, and it's either phrased that way or it's phrased as like just like tell me about yourself, right? Just like very vague, very open. So my approach is it took me a long time to get to this, but I always say that I'm a results-driven storyteller, and that's sort of my key phrase. And I think that can be helpful. Like I've heard people say things like, I'm a full stack marketer, which obviously full stack is usually what you mean when you say engineering, but they're saying it to show like I can do anything under the realm of marketing. And so there's exercises that we did at MIT where we had to write down different words. And so I encourage people to try this. Write down different words that you feel like describe you, different phrases that you feel like describe you. And then we would partner up with someone else in our class, and we would have them go through our LinkedIn, our all of our different social profiles, and have them answer the question on our behalf. So if someone else had to answer, tell me about yourself, what would they say? And a couple things would come out of it. Sometimes you'd be like, that was amazing. Like, that's how I'm going to describe myself. Or sometimes you'd hear like, whoa, like that's not at all what I want people to take away when they come to my page, right? And so that would be really helpful in learning. So write down some key phrases and then do that exercise with friends or colleagues, whoever it might be, who's willing to help you. And then combine all that. So that's what I did. And I realized that the key words and what people were saying about me was that I love telling stories, whether pitching, whether giving a speech, whether doing an interview, but I'm always rooted in like, here's like the tangible thing you can take away from it. Like if you look at any of my marketing presentations, it's not about just like the feeling, it's about like, these are the specific outcomes that you can have. And so results-driven storyteller really resonated with me because storytelling traditionally is something that's based on emotion. But when I talk about storytelling, I mean it in like, here's like the actual outcomes I want you to have from this story. And so results-driven storyteller is where I ended up. But it was that exercise that I followed of writing down different phrases and things that mattered to me, and then having someone review my LinkedIn and going through that really helped me get to that.
So you figured it out what you want to do, how you want to be perceived. How do you have a supporting argument for that? You just say, for example, whenever we say something, we need the supporting argument for that, and that is what makes it really convincing. What do you think are the most important sources of those supporting arguments that sound really valid as well?
Yeah. For that, for me, I would pull from my experiences. So that doesn't just have to be from a job. It could also be from like an extracurricular club. It can be from something you did personally, right? And so I think like when I was interviewing for my internship at Snapchat during business school, I said like, I'm a results-driven storyteller, and it comes through in a number of ways, whether I was at HubSpot writing articles for their blog, where I would then analyze performance and viewership and lead generation conversion to see like, okay, did my article actually mean something, to even when I'm just dancing at an event and I'm feeling out how much applause did I get, how many people came up to me after and told me I did a good job. Like I'm always analyzing how my performances and my creative energy is resulting to something. And so I said it a little bit more smoother when I did it, but that's how I substantiate, as I say, all right, this is what I am, and here are like the specific ways in which I actually
So, Anum, I have another important question from you. So, for example, you're taking my interview. What is the perception that you're getting, and what would you like me to improve in myself, since like we're talking about pitching ourselves and self-branding?
Interesting. So like what feedback would I give you based on how this has been going?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think overall this has been really good. I think one thing that helps with our personal brand is having someone of an audience, like not just attending this event, but how do you actually make sure the audience stays connected long term? So one thing I always do, and maybe we're going to get to this to the end, so it's not criticizing at all, but I always try to make very, very clear how people can reach me. And so if you notice on my name, I don't know if people can see my name on the screen, what I put in, but I always put in @Anum afterwards because that's my Twitter handle, or @Anumanti because that's my Instagram, because you want to make sure that there's a way for people to continuously stay in touch with you, right? And so for everyone listening, that's how. Those are my Twitter and my Instagram. And so I think that's one thing that I always try to make. If you notice, look at any of my presentations, I usually do that at the very beginning in my like introduction or on my slides. I always show exactly where people can find me. And the benefit of that is that if someone decides to quote you on Twitter or like share what they learned while in your session, you want them to attribute it back to you, right? So you get that credit and you can grow your audience that way. And so that's one thing I always recommend.
That's really that I never thought of it that way. And I'll work on that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So one thing that our audience really wanted to know the answer for was, so for example, like fresh graduates, they're all usually really concerned about how their actual skills. So for example, this not the interpersonal skills or the personal skills. They're just concerned about the skills that they learn at the grad school, that they could be technical skills or there's some tools that they've learned. They're more concerned about that, and then they, in the process, for example, some of the Indian or Pakistani schools, they do not focus on grooming yourselves and how to, have a proper conversation. Knowing that, what would be some skills or what would be some things that they need to practice before they start going for their interviews?
So this might be a little different than what you usually hear, but I would make sure that this is an amazing tip that I got from another manager at HubSpot when I was going for my MBA interview. She was like, make sure you feel like yourself, because what was different for me, like when I was going into my MBA interviews, is like I never owned a suit. Like I literally had never had a suit in my life, but for MBA interviews, like everyone usually shows up in a suit, but I don't feel like confident in them. And so that was something that I felt I really struggle with, is how am I going to come off like confident if I'm like bulked down in this outfit that I don't typically wear? And so she's like, listen, like, yes, that's like what people wear, but like you need to make sure you're wearing whatever is going to make you as confident as possible. And so I would do like part of the suit, and then in my pad folio that I would bring with my resume and where I was going to take notes, I took a Harry Potter pen. It was always a magic wand pen. And it was just like a reminder of who I am, and reminded me like, okay, this is who I am. Like I have to be here and present confidently. And so anytime you go into an interview, like remember who you are, wear what you're going to be comfortable in. And if what you have to wear is not what you're comfortable in, make sure you bring something that will like make you remember who you are and like reinstill that confidence. Because for me, like that really helped me. It's just having that silly little magic wand pen as like my writing tool just made me feel like, okay, I'm Anum, like this is what I'm here for,
I know, I get it. You have that one thing that identifies you, and you have that with you, so that you feel connected to this. So maybe I think that the entire point was that you're going into a new place, and that one thing is something that you can connect to, so that makes you really connected to the place as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Okay. How do you balance work and life, like your personal and your work? This is something I'm struggling with, and I'm pretty sure people from like the entire work from home community is facing. So, really wanted to hear some tips.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm not doing the best job because I'm a startup founder, and so my work seeps into just my life all the time, and there's not really like time to shut off. But when I did work for a company, like I was very specific about my days off. I can't tell you how many friends I talk to who are like, oh yeah, I never use up all my vacation days. I'm like, why would you not? Like, I know you have a lot of work, and I know there's always more to be done, but like, there's no reason to put a company, someone else's company in particular, before yourself. Like, yes, work hard, and the days that you do work, give it your all. But then, I'm very much about that. When I used to work for companies when I was in school, I would always have at least 1 weekend a month where I did nothing. I would just veg out and like watch Netflix, and just I would kind of feel gross by the end of it. But as a result, I felt more energized to be productive the next day. But like, use all your vacation days. Like, make sure you take time off. Like when I decide I'm going to sign off for dinner now, like during work from home, like that's it. I am off for dinner. I'm going to make sure I take a full hour, watch my favorite show, eat a good meal. And if I want to do work again after, at least like I took that full break for myself. The other thing that's been really important now that we're work from home for me is that working out really makes me feel energized. So I make sure I go for a run whenever I can, or I can just like, lift some quick light weights at home. And so it might be different for everyone. Sometimes for me, it's cooking. Sometimes for me, it's working out, whatever it might be that makes you feel detached from work. Try to insert and sprinkle that in a little bit every day.
And you have been through different journeys, and whenever you make a switch, you need to learn a lot, and there's a lot of investment in learning the new stuff that's coming your way. There might come a point that you've made some of quite a few switches in a period of 5 to 6 years, and you do feel burnout. I mean, even though if you're learning a new thing, you just lose that capacity to absorb more. How and it's the need of the word, right? It's the need of the time, and it's like something you always need to be so upskilled and skilled and every single word that goes in there. So how have you struggled with that, and how did you come out of it, and what would be a good tip that you would give to the world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely struggling with burnout a lot more now than I ever have before in my career, being a founder, and having to face constant rejection and constantly going up this uphill battle. So for me now, in terms of learning, it's really about making sure I take time away from work and thinking about different avenues to learn from, whether through reading or a podcast, what it might be. But when I was working for companies, I think we feel this need as soon as we join somewhere to immediately start providing value, immediately raising your hand, immediately giving stuff. I was given great advice at a Woman on Board event that was just the first few weeks, just listen. I know you're thinking I have to make my voice heard as quickly as possible. People think I'm smart and stuff, but there's so much more value to listening, absorbing, processing, and then being you know what, I've now heard all this stuff that people are saying and have a unique idea to bring to a table versus just saying something earlier that maybe got my voice heard, but was just not as interesting as what I could have said if I waited 2 weeks to learn, right? So whenever you just start a new job, I really encourage you to just listen to what people are saying. What are the kinds of links people are sharing? Learn from everything that's happening in the environment, and then use that to process and figure out how can I contribute to this environment.
Thank you so much for taking out time, Anum. I mean, we have 4 minutes left, and I know that you have some key takeaways for everybody. So if anything's left and you want to say something, I want to, especially make sure that I need to give you the last 5 minutes to say something because you're a really good storyteller. So,
Thank you. No.
that you have anything that you want to say to the community, I would really like to give this time to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think the last thing that that we didn't talk about that I want to make sure gets across is their email is such a powerful tool for communicating, and we often do not use it right. That was one of the things that one of my early managers did for me, which I'm very thankful for, is she criticized every email I sent. It was this sentence didn't need to be there. These you could have put into bullets. You could have gotten this across sooner, right? And so try to figure out what are ways in which you can be really clearly communicative over email. There's a few ways I do that. One is you don't need to have a really long opening around oh, how are you? How's life? All these sorts of things. Just hope you're well. Cool. Move on to the next statement. Try to use bullets as much as possible. It's really hard for people to go through and read 2 paragraphs of an email, but if you just quickly say hey, I was hoping we could connect to discuss A, B, C, just make it really quick and easy for them to absorb. So even if they're just quickly looking on their phone on their way to work, they're just okay, cool, this is what they want to discuss. And then with scheduling too, use a tool, whether it's Calendly has a free tool. It makes it so much easier versus having to go back and forth and send people oh, I could do these times, and they send you their times, and you're going back and forth piecing it together. I just send my link and be hey, happy to hear when you're available. Here's my Calendly link for you to just grab some time. And that just makes it, again, really making sure your email communication is super effective. Otherwise, things will just get forever lost in your inbox. So quick statements at the beginning, use bullets, and use a tool like Calendly for meetings. The last resource I'll give is there's an Instagram account called Boss Women Collective. They do a great job sharing email templates that you can send as a follow-up after a job interview. They have specific stuff on there on how to be more concise. So instead of saying in order to, just say to, and it does the same thing but uses less words. So their page has a number of different tips, templates, and words, and it's also a South Asian run page. So lots of great content on there. So I definitely encourage you to check them out.
I have, since like we were talking about emails, there are different conventions and like different cultural differences that we have when we're coming from different communities. What was one really funny incident that you ever came across with when you were sending an email and it was like taken into a completely different context?
I don't know if I've had that happen over email. I definitely have that happening now over like calls, because like I said, we have a team in London. We have a team member in London, team member in Pakistan, and then team members in the United States. So sometimes we'll start talking about, topics that aren't spoken about as much. Like, for example, the other day, someone on our team started talking about sexual relations, which probably would never happen on a call in a Pakistan meeting, right? And so like I was like watching my US employee and then my Pakistan employee and like their different reactions, and I was like, oh boy, like this is a really big different like cultural norms like now like merging together. So I've definitely experienced it in virtual conferencing world, but not so much in email form.
Thank you so much for your time, Anum. It was a really amusing session. I got to learn so much from you. I hope we get to stay connected, and looking forward to learn from you, from the rest of the guides that you share. And do everybody please do go out and go to Anum's website. It's really really beautifully articulated. It's very easy to absorb. So much less content. Just click in there, and you get to know everything that you want to know about her. And she has amazing guides. Please go there. Please check them out. Thank you again, Anum, and everybody have a good time. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, everyone. Good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.